But one of the ones that my coach has said that I need to go back over and make sure that I clarify, that's my wife. Yeah, so my coach suggested that we go back and look at the parenting style quiz that we passed out. There are 12 questions or so. This is not an in-depth psychological survey. It is just gives you an idea of, do you have certain tendencies? Do you among the 4 parenting styles, the permissive and the authoritarian and balanced and the various. And rather than go over that and spend much time on it, I'll tell you how to grade it. If you took all 12 questions, how to grade it, and that'll give you an idea of where you ended up. You might be exactly where you need to be. If you're a balanced parent and you're providing lots of support and lots of control to your children as they grow up and things are going well, great. If you find, however, that maybe I'm tending a little towards the heavy side, I'm more authoritarian than maybe I should be, and I confess when I took this little quiz, I'm a little on the heavy side, a little more authoritarian, and so I wanted to balance that some, and that's the benefit of it. So if you score, if you had an A, if you circled A on one of the questions, that's worth 0 points. It's not a bad thing, it's just a scoring system, okay? For every B that you circled, that's 2 points. Every C is 4 points, and every D is 6 points. And when you tally them up, if your score is between 0 and 14, that's what she calls the permissive parent. That's the ones that you can't say no to your child. It's too easily swayed by your persistent child. You feel frustrated and angry because there's so little control over your child. That's the permissive parent. Most of us don't want to feel that way forever. By the way, parenting is not, it is not impossible to have peace in your household when you're a parent. How did I phrase that carefully enough, okay? Parenting is always going to be a challenge, okay? It's not supposed to be easy. I think that's part of God's punishment for us getting kicked out of the garden. You're going to raise kids, ha, 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 okay? Because He raised them, and they messed up. I'm not saying that's God's fault. We have free will. But I think they're part of the punishment. Wait a minute, did I say that out loud? Okay, but anyway, raising kids, well, but pain in childbirth, that's just the beginning. Okay, so yeah, it is part of the punishment. If you scored 14 to 36 points, that would be the Democratic or the balanced, or excuse me, Democratic, that means she used different phrases than we used up there. You've been trying, most likely had some success in enlisting your child's cooperation. You treat your child as an equal human being and try to be fair and consistent. So why do you feel still that if you could be doing a better job? Why is it that your child still misbehaves so frequently? And a very common trait of the Democratic parent is the tendency to lecture, teach, and moralize to the point of forcing your child to tune you out, called parent deafness. Okay, 36 to 50 points is the balance, and that's what we're trying for as we do this. That means you have equal amounts of support and control. And then finally, 50 to 72 points is the autocratic or the authoritarian parent. And if you want to read that or you want a copy of that, it's here. There, that's done. Parenting style, we're not going to do that. Get to my notes. Okay, last night we talked about there is ideally a progression that we go through as we parent. We start when they're small with telling children what to do because they're not born with this innate information. They don't know that the stove is hot. There are 2 things that children do know that evidently they are born with that we figured out so far. One is the fear of falling, and the other is the fear of loud noises. That's the only thing that children are born with as far as managing and controlling their behavior. So I guess if you're really upset at a child, boo, that'll fix them, right? No, I don't recommend that. It's just a bad joke, I guess. But anyway, so we talked about discipline and not punishment. We talked about control. And so today we're going to cover teaching, and that's this morning, and this afternoon will be coaching. So telling when they're small, teaching when they're a little bit bigger, coaching when they're a little bit bigger yet, and finally delegating. Let me give you an example of how that, just a very simple example of how that plays out. When the children are small, 2, 3 years old, I told them, don't touch the stove, it's hot. But if they grow up thinking don't touch the stove, they're never going to be able to fix themselves dinner. So why would I be telling an 18-year-old child, still 18-year-old adult, don't touch the stove? It's not going to work. I need to have a plan, a progression, so that by the time they're 18 to 20 years old, they're old enough to take care of themselves. That's the goal. I don't want a 35-year-old living in my basement. If you're 35 and you live in the basement, don't take offense. Don't live in mine, okay? Because the empty nest is wonderful, okay? So when they're small, I tell them, here's what to do. Here's the consequences if you do it. When they're a little bit older, here is a skillet. And, you know, I remember Josh and Angie were both so small, they had to stand up on a little stool there at the stove. And here's how you scramble an egg. We start with the basic stuff. What am I? I'm 62 years old, and when I'm left to my own device, I had to stop and think. And when I'm left to my own devices, I still scramble eggs. That's my default. I don't know if maybe it was ingrained when I was very young, but so you start with telling, don't touch the stove. Now, here's how you scramble an egg. And then when they get a little older, how do you prepare a menu? What kind of things go with what kind of things? You cannot have bacon and now you can, excuse me. It's not healthy to have bacon and sausage and, you know, and just have a meat plate. And if you're really a fan of bacon, you can have a whole bacon plate. That's legal. That's different, okay? So, but how do you plan a meal? What goes with spaghetti? Well, a salad, maybe some garlic bread, some iced tea, you know, and well, what goes into getting a dinner together? And so you start teaching them. You go to the grocery store, here you got $25, make us dinner, and walk them through the process. Then by the time they're 16, 17 years old, and we did sometimes, I would call home and say, I'm going to be late. I won't be home until 7 o'clock. Please have dinner ready. They didn't ask, what do you want? If I'd told them if I'd wanted something in particular, I would say so. I just said, please have dinner ready. And either one of the kids that go to the refrigerator, go to the cabinet, could put together something, and by the time I got home at 7, we could eat. Telling, teaching, coaching, and delegating. It's a progression. There's a lot of overlap, by the way. It would be wonderful if you could say, okay, you're 13, now it's time to switch. I remember one of my children, I'm not going to pick on my son all the time, but I remember one of my children, there was a time I was really frustrated. Things weren't going as well as I thought they should be going, and I sat my child down and I said, look, your mother and I had this figured out before you were born. Telling, teaching, coaching, delegating. We wanted to get it all and get it so that you could be, by the time you're 18, 20 years old, you'd be independent and able to take care of yourself. He said, yes, sir. I said, you're behind schedule. It's time to step up. And that child did, and it worked out. So, but there should be a progression. It just makes it a little bit easier and tells you kind of where you are. So one of the principles of human relationships, this is not just about parenting, but about everything, but one of the principles of human relationships is we teach people how to treat us. There's a scary thought. If you're not getting along with your spouse or your child or your grandchild or your whatever, you've worked on this relationship and built it to the point where it is right now. You know, the style of parenting that we talked about, you don't have to put it up, but the style of parenting is teaching your child how to respond to you. If you're very authoritative, you are teaching them, yes, as long as you're small, you got to do what Daddy says. When you get a little bit bigger and you got a louder voice than he does, you can yell at him. I don't want my children to learn those kinds of things. I mentioned even we went to the extreme, some people say it's extreme, of turning the television off in our house. No cable, no antenna. Wow. Must live like Fred Flintstone. But I don't want to teach my children to treat their father like those kids on TVs do. So I believe it's worth the risk, or worth the sacrifice, rather. So we teach people how to treat us. I mentioned last night the verse in Proverbs, chapter 22, which says, bring up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he is not depart from it. It's not a really accurate translation in the King James, because they put the word should in there. The original Hebrew has more the context of how a child grows. Figure out how he grows. We talked about how does he express love last night. Figure these things out and use those, mold those, prune those ways so that when they are old, they will not depart from them. I had a woman come into my office. I usually do not get husbands and wives, mothers and fathers. Many, many times divorce, well, it damages children. And I don't know that you can find books, you can find authorities that say no, it doesn't. You can also find books that say that 7 cups of coffee and lots of sugar is good for you. It just depends on what you're looking for. Divorce damages children. In 1 Corinthians, it talks about, 1 Corinthians 7, if your husband, if you're a Christian, he's speaking to the women, although I don't think the gender particularly applies, but it's easier to read if he doesn't say if you, he, she, every time it's mentioned. So it says, if a woman has a husband who refuses to be a Christian and he doesn't like what she's doing, he can leave. That's 1 Corinthians 7. But then he says, it's better that you stay together. Otherwise, your children, it didn't say cursed, and I don't have the verse looked up right here. But the context, and it didn't make sense to me for a long time. But it's almost as if your children are tainted. There's something, and now that I have become a marriage and family therapist and studied it more, children of divorce, and what I do with couples, when I was doing my private practice where I worked a lot of adulteries, when the couple would sit down, I'd say, okay, let's name bad things that happen to kids. Suicide, that's pretty bad. Drug abuse, that's pretty bad. Premarital sex, yeah, that gets you in a lot of trouble. And we'd go through a list, and I'd say, now, pick one. I'd say, what? Yeah, pick one. Because you guys are fixing to get a divorce, you're cutting the legs out from under your children, and they're going to do one of them. So pick one. And hopefully that gets them long enough to. For the unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife, and the unbelieving wife is sanctified by the husband. Otherwise, your children would be unclean. But now they are holy. And I thought, what is this? Children are cursed because parents get divorced? Well, not in a spiritual sense. They're not going to go to hell because parents get divorced. God doesn't work that way. But they're going to struggle. And that's why I said when we very first started, thank you, Danny. When we very first started, I said the most important relationship, the most important diet in the home is the husband and wife. That's more important a relationship even than the mother and father. Because if they can get that right, and it's tough. We could talk all weekend about how hard it is to get two human beings to be on the same page and consistently and raise children. It's tough. But our goal is to keep them together. Our goal is to raise children who are not tainted, unless that's enough out there. We teach people how to treat us. Had a woman bring in her child. He was 7 or 8. It's been several years now. By the way, when I tell you these stories from my practice, you realize, of course, that I tell you the good stories, right? I'm not going to tell you about the 15 that didn't listen, didn't participate, didn't want it to change, and they didn't change. Those are frustrating for me too. So someday when I write my book, I'm going to put the good stories in. Single parents. Yes, okay. I want to make sure you understand too that in talking about parenting, and I present Plan A. I make no apologies for it. Plan A, God designed husband and wife be mother and father, and they raise kids. That's the way it's designed. Jesus even said it when he referred back to Genesis. When Dad and I started all this, here's what we meant. Well, what about all those parents that aren't Plan A? There are lots. Are they condemned? No. Are they going to suffer all their life? I'm not saying that. But you're going to have to work harder at parenting if you're a single parent. Because you're going to have to fill both roles. And that's tough. Sometimes even, boy, I almost said that word. It's tough. Let me make some suggestions, though, if that's the circumstances you find yourself in. When Diana and I, our children were early teenagers, and we moved to a certain city, and our family was a long way off. That's a short version. Family was a long way off. We went to church. We got to know folks a little bit. And Stella Carson, I'll say it and honor her here in front of God and everybody. Stella Carson was a widow. She was 78 years old. She had some family but didn't do much. She was a single lady. And so Diana and I talked about it, and we approached Stella Carson and said, can we adopt you? And she said, what? Actually, she said, what? I can't do it like she did because she was from Selma, Alabama. And she had an accent that would put the fuzz on peaches because everything she said had at least 2 syllables in it. And I'm not trying to make fun of her. She just talked that way. Anyway, we said, Stella, can we adopt you? And she said, what do you mean? I said, well, our kids don't have grandparents. Certainly not any close. So we would like to make you an honorary grandma. She said, well, what does that mean? I said, well, when Joshua has a sports activity, you're invited. When Angie goes and has a play, or she plays she sings in the chorus, you're invited. When we have family for Thanksgiving, if you're not committed to your family, you're invited to our house. If we have guests over, you're invited. We want you to be an influence on our children. So if you're a single parent, I recommend do the same thing. Adopt a grandparent. They need you as much as you need them. I remember there was 1999 in Searcy, Arkansas, January, I think, there were 17 tornadoes in that county in one night. I was sitting in the bathtub by candlelight studying Greek because you don't get a night behind in Greek. I don't care. There's a test, you study. So I was in the bathtub studying Greek. Diana and Josh and Angie spent the night over at Stella's house sitting in the hallway with Stella because they needed each other. So find a grandparent and adopt them. Find a parent or parents, or let's back up. Find kids that are turning out, yeah, I like those kids. I'd like for my kids to turn out like that. And then make friends with the family. Now this is going to sound strange, brothers and sisters, because friendships in America today are hard, okay? We grow up thinking because we have a neighbor, and that's my friend. He's my neighbor. I wake up in the morning, she's my neighbor. We go play. If we have a fight, tomorrow we make up because that's my only neighbor. And so we grow up thinking friends come easy. No, they don't. And now that we're adults, you actually have to work at it. I have approached David Smith, a friend of mine, Barry Fogel. The reason we are friends is because we make the effort to call once in a while. Not every day, not even every month. But you have to work to maintain it. A friend, I say a friend, he wasn't then, came to our church. He and his family, they were the same age as our children, and they'd been married about the same time. David's smart. You may even remember David and Kathy Smith. He's, painfully smart. And he doesn't rub it in. He's just smart. And I thought, boy, I'd like to get to know, because I like to hang around people that are smarter than I am. You learn things, And then they got transferred out. And I told Diana, man, I missed it. I blew that opportunity. She said, opportunity? I said, to have a friend that's as smart as David Smith. And so, man, I don't like that. Anyway, a year later, they got transferred back. And I approached, I'm an adult male, walked up to David Smith and said, okay, I blew it the first time. I want to be friends now. He said, what? I said, look, if we wait for it to happen, it won't. So let's plan it. I want our families to do things together. I want to get to know you better. I want us to be friends. He said, well, okay. Now, I realize, brothers and sisters, that I'm a little off bubble, okay? I don't deny that. But I'm also the kind of guy that doesn't believe you should wait until somebody's dead to say nice things about them at their funeral. And often we do that. Sometimes we make up nice things just to be able to say nice things at their funeral. No, we're glad he's gone, but boy, he was a nice guy. But anyway, so David and I are friends now. I could call him now and say, I'm going to be here to be at your place tomorrow night. And he'd say, okay. He lives in another state. We have to work at being friends. There. So if you are, and remember this all started with, if you're a single parent, what do I do then? Find people to help you raise your child or children. Because it's going to be doubly hard if you're doing it by yourself. Okay, now let's move on. We teach people how to treat us. Woman came into my office. She had her husband in tow, and he was in tow. He'd rather have been watching football. And she had her little boy, and she said, he's oppositional defiant. I want him on pills. And she held up a piece of paper. I'm not making this up. She held up a piece of paper. She had printed it out offline. Internet is a wonderful tool. And it said, here are the symptoms of oppositional defiant. And she had checked them off. And then at the bottom, she had added some more. I said, goodness gracious, what is this young man doing? And she said, 4 to 5 times a day, he throws a fit. And she said, they are royal fits. Now, at 7, he can't cuss, okay? Because he knows what'll happen if he cusses. Which, by the way, is how you tell there's one of the rules. There are certain things we just won't do. So he won't cuss, but he kitty cusses. I hate you, you're ugly, you're fat. And he threatens, nobody here loves me. I'm going to go play in traffic. If I got run over by a truck, nobody would even miss me. And he slams doors. He turns furniture over. He hits walls. He's not big enough to punch holes in them yet. And he kitty cusses. I said, how long does this last? She said, from 20 to 45 minutes. What makes it stop? She said, when I've had it up to here, I turn on him and I'm a mother bear and I just chew him out. Go to your room. And he goes to his room and slams the door. She said 10 minutes later, he comes out and he's fine. Acted like nothing ever happened. I'm a nervous wreck because I know it's coming again 4 to 5 times a day. The whole family, got a 12-year-old sister, has a 3-year-old sister, and the dad, we're all very careful around him because we don't want to set him off, but something's gonna. I said, oh, wow, that's a miserable way to live. And she said, yes. She said, I want him on pills. I'm a therapist, I don't do pills. Let's see if we can do something different. That's what therapists do. And so I said, can I talk to Junior? She said, sure. So I sent Mom and Dad out to the waiting room, and I closed the door, and it's just me and Junior. And it was like talking to a little 30-year-old. I know I stepped off camera. I'll keep talking so they'll know I'm still here. Oh, 2. That's it. Okay. Am I still on, Wes? If I sit down right here? Okay. So I'm sitting in my chair. This little man is sitting in his chair. His feet are flat on the floor. He's sitting up on the front edge. He's got his hands clasped in his lap, and his back is straight. I'm talking to a 30-year-old. And I said, so, tell me about your fits. Oh, I don't throw fits. I said, oh, really? What do you call them? Well, I whine. Okay. Tell me about whining. Well, you know. I said, okay. I said, do you whine at school? Oh, no. Well, why not? If you whine at school, they send you to the principal's office. And he was speaking very distinctly. I'm not making fun of him. This is the way he was communicating. If you whine at school, they send you to the principal's office. I said, what happens there? I don't know. And I don't want to find out. He wasn't stupid. Okay? So here's this kid that doesn't whine at school. He does whine at home, and 4 or 5 times a day. You tell me who he's dancing with. It's not the school teacher. Okay? So I said, so let me guess. Let me get this straight, rather. You and your mother have worked out a game. Oh, it's not a game. This is not fun. Okay. But is it fair if I say that you if you do something the same way all the time, and you have rules like kickball? If you step up to the plate and they roll the big red ball to you, and you kick it real hard, and you run to third base. He said, oh, no, Mr. Charlie, you run to first base. I said, oh, so there are rules. Yes. So you run to first base, and then you make the bases and come home and you score a point. He said, yes, sir. He understood there were rules to games. I said, so if I could convince you that there are rules to the way you and your mom interact, could we call it a game? He said, okay. Now he's 7, but he's not stupid. He's following me so far. I said, okay, so I'm going to describe the rules for you and your mother's game. You start to feel hungry or lonely or sad or just needing a hug. And mom doesn't pay any attention. And so you whine, and eventually she pays attention. I'm going to give you a direct quote, okay? Well, yeah. He understood the game. Now, there's a part of the story that I intentionally left out. I mentioned briefly that he had a 3-year-old sister, 12-year-old sister and a 3-year-old sister. The part I left out was the family did not know when the sister was born, the younger sister, that she was allergic to milk. She failed to thrive, wouldn't put on weight. She had diarrhea. She was throwing up all the time. She spent a lot of time in the emergency room, a lot of time in the hospital, tubes in, tubes out. I mean, she was a sick little girl. This little boy went from at 4 being the baby of the family to being nobody. And the mother said, I ignored it as long as I could. He would start yelling and screaming, and I'm just going to put it on the back burner. I'm not going there. And eventually, I'd have to give in. And then I'd ignore him for longer. He lasted longer than I did. I'd have to give in. And longer. So now we've worked our way up, slowly teaching these rules of the engagement. That's the words I use, rules of engagement. And it had worked to the point. And so when I brought Mom in, I said, Mom, you trained him to do this. I did not. I would not train my son to have 4 to 5 fits a day. Ma'am, I'm not saying that you're at fault. I'm not blaming you. I'm saying this is the way it's worked out. So while they were still out in the waiting room, I said, Junior, let's change the rules of the game. Okay. A little leery. He doesn't know where this therapist guy's going, right? I said, from now on, when you take a deep breath, not even when you start to whine, when you start thinking about whining, when it's way back down here and you just figure it back here, your mom's going to go, I recognize that game. I don't want to play. When you talk to me nice, I'll listen. And Junior and I play this back and forth, repeating it with each other. I recognize that game. I'm pointing fingers even, okay? He got that down, pointing fingers. I recognize that game. I'm not going to play. Talk to me nice, and I'll listen. Now, Junior, from that point forward, she is absolutely going to ignore you until you talk nice. Now then, you will be in control, he thinks, okay? We're giving him a good option. We're giving him ways to work. You will decide when your mother pays attention to you again. And so she's going to absolutely ignore you until you talk nice. He said, okay. So I asked Mom and Dad to come back in the office. He said, Mom, who owns it now? He said, I'm going to teach you the new rules of the game. Whose rules are they now? They're his. He's going to teach Mom. So he worked his way through it with Mom. I'm not going to repeat it all. But he worked. Here's what we're going to do. When I start to think about whining, you're going to interrupt and then you're going to ignore me. And she looked at me and she said, this is not going to work. I said, ma'am, you're paying me $75 today. I was a very inexpensive therapist. And you're going to come back in a week and pay another $75 just to have the satisfaction of proving to me that this did not work. That puts you $150 in the hole. Is it worth a shot? She said, well, yeah, I guess I can do that. Okay, you just got to put it in terms people understand, that's all. So I did a couple of extra things though, okay? So, and I want to make sure that you understand, I'm well aware I do not want to set up a situation where a 7-year-old is yelling, screaming, throwing a fit, he's being ignored by his mother, and he runs out and gets run over by traffic. I don't want that to happen. But I don't want Junior to know how far Mom will go to intervene either. So I sent Junior out in the lobby, closed the door, he played with Legos, and I explained to Mom and Dad a couple things that I wanted to happen as well. I want you to completely, absolutely, and 100% ignore Junior when he escalates. I don't care if he breaks Grandma's vase. If you really care about Grandma's vase, go home and take it up right now because it might happen. Junior will have no choice but escalate. He has to. This is what he's been trained to do. We don't know how long he will go, but it'll be longer than you've done so far. And she said, okay. I said, second, if he does decide to do something dangerous, like go out and jump off the roof or play in traffic, intervene. Don't ignore that. But I don't want him to think that you're going to intervene, otherwise he'll move that up on the schedule. That's why I did it that way. I said, and the third thing I'd like for you to do is to guarantee me that Mom will spend 15 minutes a night with Junior. No other kids, just Junior. I don't care if you play checkers. I don't care if you play in a coloring book or read a story. 15 minutes a night. If little sister gets sick and has to go to the ER, Dad can take her. You will finish your 15 minutes with Junior and you'll get there before they've even got her checked in. So Junior gets his 15 minutes. You see, the guy that invented play therapy, he discovered parents don't play with children. He actually went to the store, bought some boxes of toys, and had to teach parents how to sit on the floor and play with children. Go figure. But he found if he could get a parent, I'm sorry. He found if he could get a parent to participate with a child for 1 hour a week, it could be a 1 hour block, it could be 6 10-minute blocks, it could be 4 15-minute blocks. If they were to participate with the child for 1 hour a week, there was a measurable improvement in behavior. And I'm asking Mom for 15 minutes a night. I'm also asking her to not tell Junior she's doing it on a schedule. Just do it. So, okay, so ignore him unless he's playing in traffic and play with him 15 minutes a night. And she said, okay, we'll give it a shot. I don't think I'm missing anything. Now understand, this is not because I am all wise and wonderful, okay? I just believe some basic principles. We teach one another how to treat us. Usually when we find we're in a certain relationship with somebody, we're not willing to say, well, I helped work this out. My brother Bobby once bought a fish tank. This will fit in a minute, you'll understand. He went to a garage sale and bought a fish tank. It was large. It was big enough that it needed a pickup to carry it. And he paid the man and he said, let's dump this green sludge out of the bottom. It had been in his garage forever, so much so that all the water had evaporated out, and there was about 2.5 inches of green, thick stuff in the bottom of this tank. And he said, let's dump that. There's no need of me taking that home. The guy said, no, you can't. There's a goldfish in there. Yeah. And Bobby said, no, there's not. I can see there. The guy said, yeah, there's a goldfish in there. So they did this through the water, back and forth, and sure enough, there was a 6-inch goldfish. Yeah, that's about 6 inches, in this green slime. And the slime, it was alive. Yes, that's a good question. The slime was so thick that if the fish laid its fins down, you couldn't see it. It had acclimated to that environment, and it was still alive over time. Okay? So Bobby took the tank home with fish and slime in it. And when he got home, he dechlorinated some water, and he added 2 more inches. And he let it sit for a couple of days. And then he added 2 more inches, and he let it sit. After a couple of weeks, the tank was full. He said it was still pretty murky, but you could see the fish floating around in there. Then he took the fish out, cleaned the tank, got everything all good and pristine and dressed out, and put the fish back in, and it survived. Our relationships are that way. Usually, no, not usually. If you look around and realize that you're in a sorry spot in a sorry relationship, it worked out that way. I'm not even going to get into husbands and wives, how bad their situations can get. But if you're dancing with your child and it isn't working, you helped create it. You're the adult. You're the one that's going to have to change it. If you don't like it, you're the one that's going to have to change it. We can start by identifying what I call rules of engagement. Usually, it doesn't matter who I'm sitting with, husband and wife, mother and father, mother and child, father and child. I say, tell me about your last argument. What was the last fight about? By the way, I believe arguing's healthy. I'm all for it. It's a statement, sometimes loud, but if it starts hurting people, physically or emotionally, it's a fight, and that's not good. So I'm all for arguing. So I say, tell me about your last argument, and they all work their way through it. What's funny is how often sitting in my office I can say, tell me about your last argument, and they go, Tuesday we had a knockdown drag out. I say, yes. About what? And they don't know. That happens a lot. We had a knockdown drag out. Man, if Diane and I have a knockdown drag out, I'm going to remember. But they happen so often they don't know what it's about. Anyway, as they work their way through it, I'm listening for what are your rules of engagement. Okay, at this level, do we have the crisis wave? Okay. She's going to put up a slide there about a crisis wave. I think this is where it goes. Nope, but we'll hit it anyway, and then we'll hit it tomorrow too, or this afternoon too. There's a pattern: wind-up, agitation, verbal abuse, and explosion. I mentioned there are lots of different models. This is one. I happen to like it because wave is easy to remember. What does somebody do when they wind up? Well, they start walking around a lot. They clench their fists. They start panting. Pulse rate goes up. Agitation, that's the next level up. What do they do then? Well, they might start pointing their finger and start hollering at you. Okay, verbal abuse, well, that's easy. Then they start calling names and start threatening. And then explosion, everybody's a little bit different, but usually it involves lots of noise and slamming things, sometimes breaking things. That's the crisis wave. I believe the intervention should come before the W. When someone goes, I recognize that game. I don't want to play. Talk to me nice, and I'll listen. So they left. See, come full circle, didn't we? They left for the week. They came back, and I thought, well, boy, she's going to be gleeful because this didn't work. I'm not making this up. Please don't misunderstand. I'm not a miracle worker. I'm not. This one worked. She sat down, and she said, okay, can I bring my 12-year-old? I said, I don't understand. She said, this has been the quietest week we've had since my daughter was born. Well, goodness, what happened? She said, well, the first day we got home after the therapy session, and he was a little unsettled. He didn't know what to expect, so he didn't explode on that day. She said, but the second day, I saw it coming. He was starting to work himself into a lather, and he took a deep breath, and I said, hey, I recognize that game. I'm not going to play. Talk to me nice. and I'll listen. And she said, he went ballistic. He went berserk. She said, but I locked my eyes on the television set, and I refused to look. He turned over the coffee table. He did jumping jacks between me and the TV. I was sitting here just staring, and he was doing jumping jacks. She said he was hollering, he was threatening, I'll go play in traffic. He didn't go outside, so she didn't worry about it. She said after 45 minutes, he was exhausted, and he wandered off to his room. He didn't even bother slamming his door. He just closed it. She said, I went to the kitchen and laughed because that was funny. And she said, he came out after about 10 minutes and said, Mommy, may I have a cookie, please? Oh, now he's talking nice. She said, I gave him a hug and a cookie. I didn't lecture him about it's going to mess up your dinner. I figured this is progress. Gave him a hug and a cookie. She changed the rules, and he bought it. He understood it. He got it. Only took one demonstration, which is really remarkable. And now if you're dealing with adults, it's going to take more demonstrations. They're harder to teach. Had a woman come in. She's mid-60s. She said, Charlie, my daughter's making me crazy. I said, oh, really? Now, there's a reason. Part of the reason I'm telling you this story, Matthew chapter 18, Jesus said, remind me about the woman, okay, with the 2 daughters. Because if I start telling this, I'll forget that part. Matthew chapter 18, Jesus says, if your brother offends you, talk to him. If he listens to you, you've won him over. If he doesn't listen, take a witness. If he doesn't listen to you in a witness, bring it before the church. And maybe he'll listen to everybody. But if he still doesn't listen, treat him like a tax collector or a pagan. And the Jews would cross the street to not have to walk on the same sidewalk with the pagans and the tax collectors. Jesus said, basically, shun him. Don't have anything to do with him. What Jesus was talking about there, Paul later talked about in 1 Corinthians, and then corrected in 1 Corinthians 5, and then corrected in 2 Corinthians, or showed the proof of it, was what I call emotional distancing. You see, human beings need an emotional connection. We have to have emotional connections. We're built that way. And I'll give you another example of how intensely this works, or how well this works. I was trained as an interrogator some time ago. Used to do that. It was fun. And interrogation is actually a technique. It's a series of techniques. No bright lights, no rubber hoses, but it's all about the connection between the interrogator and I'm going to say bad guy for shorthand, okay? Interrogator and bad guy. We're assuming at this point that we have case, facts, and evidence indicate that you are the one that did this crime, and now we're just sitting here to figure out why it happened. That was the line I would use. If I ask that person a question, and I'm sitting right here, not quite knees touching, but close enough to be in their personal space, I'm intentionally creating tension because there's this emotional tension between us, and I'm doing it on purpose. He says, can I smoke a cigarette? No, because cigarettes calm you down. I don't want you calm right now. I want you on edge. So I'm sitting here real close. There, that better? I'm sitting here real close, and I'm asking questions, and if he lies to me, now remember, by the time I get to the interrogation phase, my investigation's done. I know the answers to my questions. I'm just trying to get him to come up and to get a confession and get this over with. And so I'm saying, so case, facts, and evidence indicate you are the one. And so, Junior, you were there in a blue car. And if he lies to me, now I've been sitting here, and we will talk Sunday about listening, okay? It's a skill, brothers and sisters, and you have to work at it. We don't just listen automatically, particularly in families. But I'm listening. He's got my undivided attention. I'm making eye contact. I'm leaning forward. I'm talking to him. And reflective listening, I'm saying back to him what he's saying to me, and I ask him a question, and he lies to me. And I back up, and I look away, and I don't say, you're a cotton-picking liar. That's a waste of breath. He knows he's lying. I don't need to tell him. But I break the emotional connection. And I look away, and I take a breath. I'm reconsidering, and no, I'm not. I'm sitting here acting. I know it's acting, okay? And I look around a little bit, and I scoop my chair up just a little bit, not much, because I don't want to waste all this tension here. You know, I just want to get Bill back up. And I go, okay, now look, we're going to try again. And I'll ask him, were you there with a blue car, or whatever it is. It works. because people need a connection, emotional connection to other people. In his case, he knows I'm between him and the door. Not figuratively, because I don't want somebody to go nuts and beat me up to get out. But I'm the one who controls his immediate future, and he knows that. And that's a connection that I want to, frankly, exploit. And so it works well enough, this breaking emotional connection. When I said last night when we were talking about discipline, if you want to sit someone in a corner, fine. Don't stand there and lecture because you're still engaged. If you're going to sit them in a corner, disconnect. When you get control of yourself, I'll be back. Because children need the emotional connection. Does that sound manipulative? Well, it is. I'll confess to you, okay? I got in trouble in therapy school because I told the professor one time, "Oh, you mean we manipulate people? I get that." "No, we don't. We do therapy." Well, I'm not doing it for my jollies, for crying out loud. That would be sick. But I do manipulate people. That's what we do. As therapists, I try to present adults who are much tougher to teach than children. I keep saying that. I try to present them with what they perceive as two options. You can do this, you can do that. Failure is an option. It's not a good one, but you can go there if you want. And I try to get them to see the benefit of choosing right, choosing the healthier option, however you want to phrase it. Okay, lady with 2 daughters. See, you reminded me. Thank you very much. Woman comes into the office and she said, "I'm 50, early 60s, got 2 daughters. One's everything you'd want a daughter to be. She's in her mid-20s. She's a school teacher, has a couple of kids. She's been married. She's just as stable and solid as a rock. Boy, I'm proud of her." Now, I'm not saying I don't love my other daughter, but my other daughter's a pain in the neck. She has been in and out of trouble ever since she was 12 years old. She has had 3 children, not married to any of the fathers, 3 fathers, baby daddies they call them nowadays, 3 baby daddies. And I had to figure out how to spell that. Spell check doesn't accept it. But 3 baby daddies, and she's into drugs, she's into alcohol, she's been arrested several times, DHS has been involved, children have been removed. She just gave this whole litany of what her younger daughter was like, and she was still in her early 20s. She said, "When my phone rings, my stomach tightens up." My younger daughter, calls every day, and something's got to be done to rescue her. I'm her mother. I love her. I go rescue her. Every day it's something. Either she needs diapers, she needs baby milk, she needs bond, something. And so I go do my mother thing. And I said, "Well, how long do you want this to go on?" And I'm going back to see we teach people how to treat us. Since her daughter was 12, she has learned how to engage her mother. She said, "Well, I'd like for it to stop today." Well, I can't do that, but here's what we're going to do. And so, and by the way, I'll confess something else to you. I'm not very wise. I know this. Many times, and I've been doing therapy for 21 years, many times, several times a week, I pray, "God, please, please say something that'll make these people's lives better, because I'm not wise enough and I don't know what's fixing to come out of my mouth. And so would you just kind of handle this one, because I don't know what to do." And that's where the interventions come from. And that doesn't mean we get into a whole bunch of stuff there, but I honestly believe that's where because I'm not wise enough to do this. But I said, okay, when your daughter calls, the younger one, and don't say anything to her, answer the phone, and have your discussion. The instant that your stomach starts to hurt, I don't know when that is, but the instant your stomach starts to hurt, I want you to say, "I'm sorry, honey, I can't go there. My therapist says I can't go there," and hang up. Don't explain. Don't engage. Your daughter will call you back immediately. I guarantee it. Do not answer the phone. Do not engage. In fact, I'd like for you to wait until tomorrow. It'll be early when she calls you. You can answer the phone tomorrow. She said, "Okay." I said, "When you answer the phone, do not even mention yesterday, the fact that you hung up on your daughter. Don't bring it up. The moment your daughter makes your stomach starts hurting, whenever that is, if she starts complaining about yesterday and you start getting uptight, say, 'I'm sorry, my therapist says I can't go there,' and hang up the phone. And do not answer the phone till tomorrow, the next tomorrow." She said, "Oh my gosh, my daughter will run my battery down and I don't even have to answer it. She will blow my phone up." I didn't know what the term was then. I'm kind of old school. "She will blow my phone up." I said, "Well, turn your phone off." "But what if?" Turn your phone off. See, it's harder to teach adults than it is kids. So she says, "Okay." So she came back the next week. She said, My daughter called me that very afternoon. I said, oh, really? She said, my stomach started hurting. I said, I'm sorry, my therapist says I can't go there. I didn't explain. I just hung up. She said, my stomach quit hurting. Amazing. She said, oh, bing, 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 bing. She started hitting my phone. I didn't answer. She said, the next day, I answered the phone. Hey, darling, how's it going? Just pretending nothing ever happened. And then she started on a tirade. I'm sorry, my therapist says I can't go there. And she didn't explain what there was. She didn't explain who Charlie was. She just said, my therapist said I can't go there. Now, see, part of this is based on Charlie's belief that if we can train a dog to be a policeman, we ought to be able to teach people how to treat us. Dogs have a limited vocabulary. They live only in the moment. They respond to repeated exposure to the same thing and corrections when they need it. And then when they get it right, even when they're tempted, when they get it right, you can take them out in public. We'll talk more about that another time. If we can teach a dog to be a policeman, we ought to be able to teach other people how to treat us. She came back and she said, I'm amazed. I said, at what? She said, well, the first day my daughter called and I hung up on her. The second day she called, I hung up on her. She blew my phone up, I just turned it off. The third day she called, and when she started on a tirade, I took a deep breath because I'm fixing to say she said, wait, Mom, don't hang up. We won't go there. She said, I had a decent conversation with my younger daughter. Now, that didn't change everything in their relationship, but that's a start. We teach people how to treat us. The woman who had the 7-year-old son, she didn't do this on purpose. Nobody wants to make their life miserable on purpose. But every time an incident occurred and she didn't think through long term, she was setting herself up. When we talk about the permissive parent, or the one that the parent that offers high support and no control, that's a better example right now. Honey, everything you want to do is fine. I'm in it. I'll buy whatever you need. I'm going to make everything you want. You got it. Imagine what kind of adult that's going to be. And you're telling them, by the way, you can't handle it. You're not smart enough. I'll fix it for you. You get in trouble? No problem. I'll make sure that I'm mommy. I'm supposed to rescue you. Hence the 60-year-old woman I was talking about. We teach people how to treat us. And if we don't like the way we're being treated right now, you can change it. Now, here's the rub, okay? And I'll say this as a therapist. I can assure you that you can change a behavior. I cannot tell you where that behavior will end up. That makes sense? I know that that person will change the way they treat you, but that person then also has the same choices that you do. They may choose to disengage. Now, a 7-year-old's not going to, okay? But if you got a boyfriend or girlfriend and you want to change that behavior, they may decide that they want to find somebody else. It's possible. I would suggest it's probably a good thing, but that's between you and them. If they can't treat you right, then they need to treat you differently. Okay, we teach people how to treat us. Crisis wave, we've already talked about. Good. There are some interventions that work with the crisis wave. Like I said, though, they work early. The way the brain works, there is a prefrontal cortex up here in the front. That's what we think with. That's where memories are stored. That's where we process information. That's where we decide what I'm going to do next. If you're walking through the woods on a trail and it's a nice, beautiful day and you hear a branch break, not a twig, I'm not talking Thumper and Bambi here, crunch. This part of your brain goes, oh my goodness, what was that? And you start looking around. And if you come around the corner, there's a grizzly bear and he's standing up on his hind legs. He's got his teeth out and his claws out. This part of your brain shuts off. If they put you in a brain scan, it'd go, he's dead. Of course, he may be dead anyway. Okay? But the amygdala takes over. The amygdala is the emotional center of your brain, behind your nose, in between your ears, and it's about that big. And it's got power way outside of that. In a fraction of a second, it's going to dump painkillers into your body in case that grizzly bear bites you. It's going to dump, those are endorphins. It's going to dump stimulants into your body because you're going to need to run or fight. It's going to, oh boy, there's a bunch of stuff that happens all at once. Your focus goes from here. Right now, talking to you, we need to go to the doctor, Diana. I'm going to move my hand forward for her. There, I can see my fingertips waving right here. But if there's a grizzly bear, that is all you see. There could be a battalion of soldiers to your immediate right, and you don't see them because they're not the threat. The grizzly bear is. The perception of time changes. Your decision-making process, all this stuff up here, as I said, shuts down. Your pulse rate goes up, way over 90 beats per minute. Respiration usually goes up. Circulation changes. It goes from the hands and the feet into your internal organs to keep you alive. If you're a soldier in combat situations, if it's that serious, 20% of the time you're going to empty your bowels and your bladder. We don't talk about that when we train soldiers. It's embarrassing, but it happens because you don't need the ballast. Your body dumps it, and it's completely beyond your control. It just happens. So all of these changes take place when your pulse and all that goes up, right? When you're arguing with your family members, your pulse rate goes up, respiration goes up. Once it goes above 90 beats per minute, you are no longer going to solve any problems. You have moved from an argument to a fight because it's about fight or flight. The time to intervene is before it starts. There, you didn't know you were going to get biology lesson 2, did you? Okay, some of the interventions that work, though, for instance, the child is winding up. You could say, I recognize the game, I'm not going to play. Talk to me nice and I'll listen. Or you could say, well, wait a minute. What are you doing? Well, I'm winding up. I'm fixing to have a real good anger here. Okay, is that what you're supposed to be doing? What's going to happen if you keep doing this? Now, these questions, if you apply them at the right time, I guarantee you will escalate the situation. Okay? I once arrested a drunk and he was belligerent. In Texas at the time, you could be arrested for DWI several times. He'd go to court, they'd pay a fine maybe, and you get 6 or 7 or 8 DWIs. How stupid is that? But let's not get into politics. However, if someone refused to take a breathalyzer test, they lose their license for a year. Never goes to court. So I arrested this guy and he was belligerent. I could file public intoxication because that's just a ticket, Class A misdemeanor, goes to jail, pays a bond, pays a fine, and he's done. Or if I charge DWI, that becomes a Class C misdemeanor and you have to go take a breathalyzer test, right? So we get to the breathalyzer test because I decided to file DWI on him. He's got 7 or 8 priors and he's belligerent. He knows this isn't going anywhere. I said, okay, and we have to read this paragraph to them. And I'm just going to read a paragraph because what I'm saying really doesn't matter. It's the tone. This is not a promise to parents to raise their children properly, but a warning to those who allow their adolescents to grow up without guidance, who raise them to go their own way. Children left their own way are not likely to change. You want to take this stupid test? No. Good. Sign here. It's all on when you intervene. And he lost his license for a year. It wasn't my fault. I just knew that if I asked these questions at the right time, I'd get a certain response, especially if he's been drinking. But those are good, depending on where you're intervening. If you can do it early enough, wait a minute, think about it. We don't want to go above 90 beats per minute. What are you doing? Is that what you're supposed to be doing? What's going to happen if you keep doing this? And is that what you want to happen? Do the Cartman manipulation triangle, please. I have mentioned a dance several times. Okay, good. Cartman, 1978, if I remember right, designed what he called the manipulation triangle. And on this, these 3 corners, is victim, rescue, and persecutor. It's a role people play. I have picked dyads, 2 people, mother and I have people come into my office, pairs, those are called dyads, various relationships. It can be husband and wife, often. It can be mother and son, very often. Father and daughter, sometimes. But they dance. And they dance on this triangle. One will start off with, he's such a rotten son, he doesn't respect his mother, he doesn't love me, I don't know why I even bother. Everything I do for him, he disrespects, he ignores, he hates, da-da-da-da-da-da, and she starts persecuting him. And he'll say, Mom, it's not that bad. I try to be good, and he plays the victim. Even whines like he's gotten his toes stepped on. And after a few minutes, she'll start feeling bad. So she'll jump over and, son, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make you feel bad. I tell you what, when we get through here, I'll take you out to eat, and we'll go to McDonald's or whatever, and it'll be okay. Now he feels empowered because she's shifted. She's not the persecutor anymore. She's the rescuer. So he shifts to persecutor, and he says, but you always do this kind of thing to me. You get me out in public, talk to somebody, put me in front of a therapist. It's the 15th therapist you've had me in front of, and now you're down talking bad about me. He's the persecutor. Well, after a moment, she doesn't feel like rescuing somebody like this anymore, so she shifts to victim because persecutor spot's taken. So she shifts to victim, and off they go. Usually I time it. I let them dance around this triangle for about 35, maybe 40 minutes until they're both good and tired of it. And then I start talking about, so are you tired of playing this game? I mix metaphors, sadly, because I'm trying to get them all straight. I mix metaphors. I said, when you play it on the playground, and you're on the merry-go-round, and you're sitting in the middle, and somebody's spinning it like crazy, what happens? You know, somebody help. Tell me what happens. You get dizzy, right. If you stay on there too long, what happens to lunch? Yeah, it gets dizzy too. It comes up too. So most people don't want to lose their lunch on the merry-go-round. So what do you do when you've played there before? What do? You stop. You get off the merry-go-round. It's a decision. I'm uncomfortable. I don't like being here. I'm going to get off. You can do the same thing with a Cartman triangle. Okay? Now I'm just making it obvious what's going on. You thought you were having an argument, an emotional engagement with someone. You don't have to do this. You can decide to get off. I'm sorry, my therapist says I can't go there. I'm going to hang up. And hang up. We had a local summer camp. The director, they bring in teenagers, and they're there for 6 weeks at a time. Teenagers, 6 weeks at a time. Whoosh. He said, Charlie, we can't go through another summer like we went through last year. The drama was intense. This kid likes that kid. They don't like the other kid. They cut them out, and they treat them like chickens in a hen yard. He said it was awful. And I taught him this Cartman, this manipulation triangle. And I said, now there are times, remember there are times if Junior runs out into traffic, there's times to rescue them. That's dangerous. There are times to help somebody in a relationship. I'm struggling with my relationship with Diana. Barry, I need some feedback here. There are times. That's not what we usually do. We usually jump in, offer our opinions, and we want to rescue. Stay off it. Decide. So we went and we spent 2 days teaching, doing a bunch of different activities, and basically teaching this Cartman manipulation triangle in about 17 different ways. One of the kids came up with something I thought was pretty cool. That's a triangle. That's deciding not to participate. There, that's a triangle. I ain't going there. All summer long, the kids would do that, my friend said. One of them would come up and start whining and go, wait a minute, is this something that's necessary? Or is this trying to engage me in a drama triangle I don't want to play on? He said it worked. We can decide how we want to be treated. It's only fair. Now, ironically, you have to teach adult couples that. Now, they do it automatically, but usually not in a healthy way. But to have to teach them how to make rules of engagement, how to make rules for arguing, we teach people how to treat us. I mentioned last night I grew up in a violent household. Diana did not. When we were dating, I remember we were at her family's house for the holidays. It was full of people, and I wanted some time just with Diana. I'm dating her, not her family. I know, but that's the way I was. And so I said, come on, let's go somewhere and talk. We ended up in the washroom, because that's the only place there wasn't other people. And I remember I sat her on the washing machine, and she said, what do you want to talk about? I said, I don't care. Something. And I just wanted your company. I said, I tell you what, let's work out our rules for arguing. She said, I quote, we're not going to argue. Now, I've never been married before. But I know better than that. Now, and to her credit and to her parents' credit, they would disagree. They'd go to the bedroom, they'd hash it out, and they came out, they were a united front. That's awesome. But she didn't really see the disagreeing or the arguing. So we worked out our rules for arguing. 41 years later, same rules. No hitting, no name calling. We will work out the anger tonight. When the anger's over, you can't bring it up again. Once we've resolved it, I don't want to be beat up because I left my socks on the floor 6 months ago. It's fair. And then once this argument's over, we're still married. Tomorrow morning, we're going to wake up next to each other. We might as well make the other 4 work. Those are our rules. You don't have to have the same ones, but they've worked for us. So, rules of engagement. I think it's fair. Jesus gave us permission. Okay? If someone isn't going to participate with you, if they're going to offend you and not take it back, not ask forgiveness, and not listen to you, disengage. The most powerful tool you have is not a spanking, parents. The most powerful tool you have is your emotional engagement. And I'm suggesting that you use it as an appropriate tool. I hope I'm not saying that to someone who's wicked enough to use it to hurt their children. Ephesians chapter 6 says, don't do that to your kids. Don't exacerbate your children. That's not the word he uses. But that's his intent. Use your emotional distance. If you're going to sit them in the corner, I am emotionally disengaged until you get yourself under control. Okay. You have a handout. Okay, we've talked about that. Why children act out. That's one of those things that we've handed out. That's okay, it can stay there. There we go. This is it's a very instructional page. I like it. There's a lot of good information on it. They break it down. Basically, there are 4 reasons children act out. One is attention seeking, and it talks about these children need recognition, even if it's negative. It's better to be wanted by the cops than to not be wanted by anybody at all. And that's a harsh reality, but that's the way some people behave. It's better to be wanted by somebody than not be wanted by anybody. So the need for recognition, even if it's negative. Children want to belong, and they're in need of reassurance. We talked about the fences last night, putting fences around. Even if they feel they are, excuse me, if they feel they're not getting the attention they deserve, they will act in ways that force you to pay attention to them. We talked about that with I recognize that game I don't want to play. They will get your attention. Power and control, because sometimes there are strong-willed children. Lord love them. If you can get them to 18 years old and both of you still want to live, that's a very good thing. But if you can get them to 18 years old and both of you still want to live, they don't need anybody else to tell them how to act. So it's a good thing, okay? But sometimes they're going to push the boundaries. No, I think often they're going to push the boundaries. That's what they look for. It says sometimes there are signs that children mistakenly believe that the only way to work together is by challenging others around them. I don't know if I buy that statement so much, but there's probably some that fit. Escape and avoidance. Nobody wants to get in trouble. Here we tend to see acting out based not on wanting to do something or trying to get out of having to complete a task. Sometimes this is a motivation problem. Sometimes it stems from poor self-esteem, performance issues. And then there are children who hurt, and they want to make sure that those around them hurt too. I hope that's not the case. I hope that's not who I'm talking to. But there are children out there that have been hurt that bad. And by golly, they're not going to be alone in it. So there's lots of reasons children act out. And then at the bottom of that, the solutions. And it talks about ignore inappropriate attention seeking, give special attention to positive behaviors, redirect negative tension. All of these things are good. Setting limits, celebrate small successes. I'm moving down through the list. And don't get caught in the revenge cycle by excessive use of punishment for emotional boundaries. You know, someone once asked me, they said, my wife is contemplating suicide. She's threatened it several times. She actually left the house with a shotgun once, and I found her at a motel before anything happened. He was really worried about his wife. I couldn't tell him because of confidentiality. Okay? I had counseled them as separate parties as well. And she said to me, I'm not suicidal, but that gets his attention. Now, I can't tell him that. Okay? But I believe what I'm fixing to tell you applies in their case, and it does in the case of children as well. If someone has to yell that loud for attention, give it to them. If someone has to say, I'm suicidal in order to get your attention, save them the trouble, give them the attention. If someone has to threaten to beat you up to get your attention, give them the attention. But what he was trying to do, the husband was trying to do with me, is to say, okay, I need to figure out her motivation. Is she just doing this for attention? Yeah. That's why people say I'm suicidal. Usually people who are suicidal, really suicidal, don't tell anybody, they just go do it. Give her attention. Take her to the hospital. And this I said with her sitting in the room. If she is crying for attention, give it to her. Take her to the hospital. But what if she's just acting out? She's wanting to make me mad. Take her to the hospital. She said she's suicidal. Take her to the hospital. But what if she's just mad and threatening? Take her to the hospital. The response is the same. Right. And in the case of raising children, well, it's okay and it's fun and it's a therapeutic exercise to decide what's the child's motivation. I really don't care. I'm usually not smart enough to figure it out, and it's usually a combination of stuff anyway. The response is the same. Give them the attention they're asking for. Now, I'm not denying that some children are very needy. Goodness gracious. We kept a little boy for a couple months, and he had, let's just say, horrible background, bad experience. And he was very emotionally needy. And Diana and I both worked. We could not provide what he needed. And so we arranged for him to go to stay with another family. And we just couldn't provide the intensity. Yes, he would not shut up. Ever. If he was awake, he was talking. Now that's not, but it's a symptom in his case, because he had to have that connection. And hopefully your children aren't in, I'm going to wager that your children have never experienced what he did. But if that's what they're needing, find a way to give it to them. If they're acting out because they need power and control, I want children to have power and control over themselves. I don't want to have to manage them for the rest of their lives. So I have a theory here. What if, and we'll talk a little bit more about this with the teenagers tomorrow, but what if I give children enough control over their own life that they're still busy keeping up with figuring out how to do that? That they don't have time to get in trouble. That makes sense? Let me say, I have a question here for me. Cartman manipulation triangle, okay. I'll get to that this afternoon. We'll talk about that this afternoon, okay. Let me show you a cheesy magic trick. Here we go, here's these. Sometimes, though, the problem with giving children, let's see if this will work here. Okay. Can I get up to the podium, Wes? Okay, good. Danny, come up here. You just volunteered. Okay, I've got 3 foam balls. The problem with giving children control over their own life is they're going to make choices different than you would. There we go, 3 foam balls. I like dressing in slacks and a dress shirt, and you know, there's a certain presentation. My son, since he was 8 years old, has liked pants with holes in them. It says you're disrespectful, Joshua, if you wear these pants. It says you don't care what other people think or feel about you. It's presenting an image, Joshua, that actually I don't want you to present. But Joshua was 12, 13, 14 years old, and it's just a pair of pants. Wear your pants. So they might choose sometimes something we don't choose. Okay, Danny, what I've got here is a foam ball, right? Do you have any holes in this hand? Okay, I'm going to put that one there, and I want you to squeeze it tightly. Don't let me in. You got it? Okay. I'm going to take this one. I'm going to stand back here. Let's see, let's get that out of the way. Okay. I'm going to take this one. I'm going to put it in my fist like this. I'm going to squeeze it real tight. I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, and ask you to open your hand. Wow. Wow. Hey, it worked. Good. I'm as amazed as you are. It worked. Let's have the other hand. Now, I know you got a hole over there, but I want you to take that and squeeze it tight. You've got those 2, right? Okay. Now, you let me in before. Don't this time. Take this one. I'm going to put it on my fist. I'm going to squeeze it real tight. I'm going to mash it down in there. Say 1, 2, 3, and ask you to open your hand.
I think you got to go home.
Well, you can't defy the laws. No, don't leave yet. You can't defy the laws of physics, okay? Right. It is impossible for me to take a ball and make it go from my hand to your hand without you seeing it, okay? But if there are 4 foam balls to begin with, I don't know how well that shows up there, okay? If there are 4 foam balls, looky there. It looks cute, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. And I can take this one and start with it out of the way. Mm-hmm. Then I tell you, I'm putting 1 foam ball into your hand, and how many am I putting? 2. I've already beaten the trick. Right. I could take this one and put it in my pocket, but that's no fun. So what I do is I tell you, remember magic's all about misdirection and lying. I tell you I'm going to put it in this hand, I'm going to squeeze it real tight. I don't, my fingers are pretty loose, and I'm going to do it slowly this time. And your brain tells you, I'm not going to miss that fat red ball. But it did. And I'm looking here to make sure you look there. And I keep using this hand and moving it around so you assume that it's empty. There's nothing there to blow on, but it looks good. And when he opens his hand, okay? I've had people throw them at me. So when I picked up those 2 balls, how many am I holding in my hand now? 3. And so I squeeze them up, and since they're nice and soft, and I make some wiseacre comment about, don't let me back in there. If I told him not to look, he would. That's what people do. So I say, I got into that one. Don't let me into this one. And he's going to make sure I do not get into that one. He's got white knuckles. Okay? I could take this one and put it in my pocket and say, boy, you look stupid. You're holding 3 balls and think they're stupid. But that doesn't work either. Okay? So I take this one and I hold it up here. I tell you that I'm going to mash it down inside my fist, and that's what you imagine. Okay? It's not what I do. I capture it, just like I did the other one. As long as I move it around and keep it like this, I can do all kinds of stuff. Point, scratch my face, You think that hand's empty, unless I do that. I blow, there's 3, and the trick's over. Now, the reason I tell you how to do this trick is because, brothers and sisters, there's always one more option. You might not even know it's there. There's always another option. It might not be one that you would choose, holes in his pants. But that's another option. I thank you, sir.
All right.
I would say give you a hand, but we don't clap in church. There is always another option. We just might not know, might not even suspect. It might not be an option that we've seen in our entire life. And if you're raising kids, I can almost assure you that's the option they'll come up with. Okay? But there is always another option. We teach people how to treat us. Teaching, carpet manipulation. Okay, and I didn't bring it this time because I had to get through security and they wouldn't understand. But I have a large silver spoon. And I stand up here with my large silver spoon. It's actually stainless steel, but it's shiny, so I'll call it silver. And I ask the audience, I'm going to today, we're just going to kind of work our way through it. I'm not going to write anything down. I want you to tell me 15 things you can do with a silver spoon. And I'm going to cheat because I know one that nobody here would give up. 21 years I've been doing this. Give me 15 things you can do with a silver spoon. Usually people start off with, no, I can't think of that many. Usually with an audience I say 30, but with an individual I do 15. We're going to do 15 today. The best I've ever heard, this young lady said, you melt it down, cast it into bullets, and shoot werewolves. Isn't that cool? Now that's thinking outside the box. I like that. Name me 15 things you can do with a silver spoon. Eat soup. Okay, you can eat with it. That's good. Stir. You can stir things with it. Yes? Twice even. Serve. Okay, that's 3. Very good. Yes, ma'am. There you go. You can stick it on your nose or your forehead. Yeah, personal decoration. I like that. Yes, ma'am. That's I'm not going to say. I started to say that's a short person solution, and I like it, yes. So we're up to 6. I'm sorry? Spank with it. 7. Okay, I like that one. Yes, ma'am? Like frosting? Okay, up to 8. Yes, sir, and then ma'am? Scratch and itch, yes. Oh, use it like a racing with the eggs and things. Okay, I think that puts us up to 9. Very good. 9? Yes, ma'am? Oh, ooh. Okay, so you play catch with a spoon. Okay, play games with it. We're up to 10. We got 5 to go. 5 things you can do with a spoon. So, oh, there, I'm sorry. Oh, a catapult. Yes. Yes, ma'am? Ah, see, she's starting to think of the constituents of it, the components of it, the characteristics of it. This is good. Melt it down and make money. Did you raise your hand, sir? No? Yes, ma'am? Spoons, okay. You like games, I can tell. So we're up to 13. 2 more things you can do with spoons.
See your reflection.
You can use it as a mirror. Do you know, in fact, it's a full-length mirror. I have found it's not a full width mirror, but it'll do full length. Okay, yes, ma'am?
You can use it to make jewelry.
Make jewelry, yes. That's 15. Very good. Yes, ma'am?
Use it as an eye washer.
Okay, to cover your eye while you're, okay, eye wash. I see. Just a second. Wes? Oh, a shiv. Do we need to talk about your history? No. But yes, you can make a knife out of it. Yes, ma'am. And then, sir? Fly swatter. Oh, I thought he was whacking a kid in the head. No? Okay, fly swatter. There you go. Yes, ma'am? Okay, use it to mix medicines when you're sick or take measure? Okay, there you go. Use it to take honey and lemon as medicine. So I think we just hit 17. How many things can you do with a silver spoon? Isn't that amazing? And when we started, you thought 15 things with a spoon, and there's more. Like I said, usually with a big audience, it's fun. Melt it down and make bullets and all that kind of stuff. So, and the reason for that little exercise is I want you to think there's always another way. I have done everything I can to get my kid to listen. I can't get him to listen. Well, you haven't tried everything. My son was old enough, 14, 15. He was on his belly watching TV one night. I stopped at the doorway. I said, Josh, before you go to bed, I want you to take out the trash. Okay, got it, Dad. What did I say? Take out the trash. No. All right, Dad. See, he knows what it's like being married or being raised by a therapist. Okay, before I go to bed, you want me to take out the trash? Yes, sir. Okay. Whose problem is it now? Should be. How many parents would remind him? Son, your program's over. Have you taken out the trash yet? Trash still there, son. Yeah, I see you got your shower and your pajamas on. Trash still there. Have you taken the trash out yet? I haven't let go of the problem yet. It's his problem. So Joshua, doing what 14, 15-year-old boys do, he got ready for bed. I'm okay with that. He went to bed. I'm okay with that too. Because I believe it's okay for children to fail. You give them opportunities, just like training a dog, give them opportunities in a safe environment. If they fail, that's fine. You make a correction, then you move on. Next time you'll try it again. So he went to bed. I bagged up the trash like a dutiful father would, and I walked from the kitchen to his bedroom, and I set it in bed with him, and I went to bed. I don't care if he sleeps with it or not. It's his problem, it's not mine. Well, Josh isn't stupid. He got out of bed and took the trash out. You know, the funny thing is, the next week I said, Josh, before you go to bed, I want you to take out. I got it, Dad. Before I go to bed, you want me to take out the trash out? And he did. Children, they learn quick. They really do when you know what to expect. When they know what you expect of them. Okay, it's 11:30. I've talked fast enough. I've worked up a perspiration there. What can you do with a spoon? What kind of questions do we have? That's the best way in the world to shut down questions, I know. Yes, ma'am.
I work at a daycare, and we set children aside from calm down and all that other stuff. We have a couple that you can, put them over in their little timeout, or not timeout, take a break area, and they immediately get up and run off. You have to keep going back, and so you don't have that time to, until eventually you just have to stand there, and usually with their back to them. But try not to, how do you break that? You're not actually breaking, you were talking about breaking that emotional
connection.
but you're still there with them when you're doing that. So is that
How old are we talking?
1 to 2?
Oh, okay. That means it's straight behavioral. You're not going to negotiate with a 2-year-old. Okay. So what eventually gets them to sit?
Just standing there.
Okay, so why don't you start with that?
Okay.
That makes sense. You would have saved several steps. I'm seriously, okay, I'm going to stand right here. When my children were very small, and please, again, as I mentioned, please forgive my use of personal stories. It's what I grew up with. I know, okay? But they would start to whine and whimper and cry in church. There's some issue, some problem. And Diana's a good, dutiful mother. She'd make sure that they were fed. She'd make sure they're changed and clean and all that stuff. And sometimes children are fussy. But even as an infant, okay, she would take them to the nursery, and instead of rocking them, which is what people do in the nursery, you sit there and you rock and you pat and okay, she set them in the bed, and she said, when you stop crying, I'll pick you up. Is that cruel? No, but you can teach a 1-year-old to control themselves. My sister-in-law, Sandy, shouldn't have said her name, we're in public, aren't we? Anyway, she'll forgive me. She was a preemie, okay? I don't remember. Do you remember, Diana, how many weeks she was early? Several.
8 weeks.
8 weeks. That's a very preemie several years ago. I will say Sandy that. I won't say how old she is. But that was a real preemie several years ago. 8 weeks. One afternoon, Pop brought Diana and her brothers to the hospital to see the baby. And as they were coming down the hall, turns out there was one baby in the nursery, Sandy. And they could hear a baby crying. There's only going to be one. You know who it is. Pop said, "Stop. Listen to this." And you could hear Sandy crying. And he said, "She's going to see if somebody's listening." And after a moment, Sandy stopped crying. Didn't hear anybody coming towards her crib, and she started crying again. That's pretty smart, I think. For a baby who really shouldn't even be born yet, she had figured out that if she cried, the nurses would come pick her up. And she could hear them walking on the way to the crib. Okay? We teach people how to treat us. And a preemie will teach it just as fast as anybody. That's amazing to me, how smart kids are. Just amazing. And it might help. I don't know. It depends on how I'm just orbiting here, okay? But it might help too, Kim. I don't know how old and how much that child understands. But to say in advance, when you earn the timeout will be until you don't get up anymore. And then when I see that you're sitting there like you're supposed to, you can get up. I would keep that. I wouldn't wait for 15 minutes. You're not trying to teach punishment. You're trying to teach self-control and discipline, right? Even to a 1-year-old. So now that I'm reminding you, you deserve a timeout. When you get yourself under control, I will let you get up. And I will keep putting you back over and over and over again until you stop and go, "Okay, I want to sit here because that's what she says I got to do." All right. Now, they're not going to say that, but they will. Have you heard of reactive attachment disorder children, RAD? Those are the children in Eastern Europe, particularly. That's the ones that they started studying originally, because those are the children that were abandoned in such numbers that they were put in orphanages, and the nurses didn't even have time to care for them. They would lay them in a crib, they would come by, change a diaper, put in a bottle, and go to the next baby. Those children got no nurturing. They would cry for a while, and then they would stop. And they were learning at that age, I'm on my own, nobody's going to help, it doesn't matter, I got to take care of me. Well, the regime changed, and those children were allowed to be adopted into the United States, and a lot of parents adopted those children, thank God for them, but they thought, I've got a baby now, all I have to do is love it and nurture it and raise it up in the admonition of the Lord, and everything's going to be hunky-dory. And they didn't know that those babies' brains had already taken a beating. Not physically, hopefully, but those babies' brains, 250,000 neural connections a minute, 1 million neural connections every 4 minutes, 15 million neural connections an hour. We're telling that child, that's how fast the baby's brain develops from infancy, or from pre-birth to about 2 years old. That fast. And every connection that baby was making was, I'm on my own, nobody loves me, I got to take care of myself. And they exhibited that when they got over here. And there were enough of them that learned that and believed that they actually got their own label. Isn't that wonderful? Reactive attachment disorder. Children learn. And I'm a believer too, Miss Kim.
Self-sufficient too. Yeah.
I said a moment ago that 1 and 2, sorry. That 1 and 2 years old are too young to negotiate. They're not. They're just too young to do it verbally. But I think it's appropriate to say, you must sit here until you get control. Then I'll let you up. You're letting them know what the rules are. And I think it's appropriate. It always works better. How many are mothers? How many had children that would bother you when you're on the phone? Same hands. What if you told the child, and I think it's appropriate, we need to teach children how to interrupt us, okay? If Barry and I are talking and Danny comes up and has a question, I can tell you exactly what's going to happen. He's going to step up, he's going to wait a moment. If he sees that we're going to continue, he's going to say, excuse me. I'll acknowledge him, Barry and I will finish, then I'll turn to Danny. That's how we work as adults. What's wrong with teaching a child that? To say, if you have something you need to talk to me about, come up and say, excuse me. I will acknowledge you, I will finish what I'm saying, and then we'll complete. To teach that, to just say it out loud. Now say back to me, how can you interrupt me? I can come up and say, excuse me. Then you'll listen to me. And then you'll finish your conversation, then you'll turn to me. Yes. Why is that so hard? It seems like it's easy sitting here, you know, but CPR is easy when you're in class too. And when you're on the phone and you're frustrated and the child comes up and you're trying to get you, and he's going, mommy, 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 and louder and louder and louder. He's not any different from the 7-year-old I told you about earlier. He's oppositional defiant. No, he's not. You're just teaching him how to dance. If you don't like the dance, quit dancing. It usually helps if you're able to say, I don't want to dance. Here's the right way to do it. I'll tell you a quick story about raising Rottweilers. Is there something I'm missing?
You were going to mention about Angie and Josh on the sofa when they were fighting.
Oh, okay. Well, this is one of my wife's interventions. That's why I always forget it. Well, that's the truth. But Josh and Angie, they were kids. They would argue, spat, you know, and she'd park them both on the sofa. You can get up when she gives you permission to. You can get up when he gives you permission to. I don't care how long you stay. And she'd go about her day. They had to work it out. Isn't that slick? We're teaching them how to be adults. That's what our goal is. We're not trying to raise kids. We're trying to raise adults who happen to be kids right now. So anything that we can do along the way, any tool we have, and I'm telling you, I'm warning you, you got to be willing to stay past a 7-year-old. You got to be willing to be past a 10-year-old. It helps to have a plan in place. You can't have a plan that has every single contingency covered. But if you know, I'm going to be telling, teaching, coaching, delegating, and by the time you're 18, my goal is for you to be out of my house. By the time you're 18, both of us will be ready for you to be out of your house. By the way, ladies, those of you who have had children, babies, as Sandy has testified, are viable at 7 months. 8 months, they probably don't even need to stay in the hospital anymore. I don't know the exact numbers, but they can be born and are viable well before they're born. I am convinced that that last month is so that the mother will do anything to get him out of there. I don't care. Cut me open if that's what it takes. I don't want another. I'm done. Okay? Centuries ago, children would leave the home at 14, 15, and 16 years old. They'd start a farm, get married, raise a family. They were dead by the time they were 30. They were viable much younger than we give them credit for today. By the time they're 16, 17, 18 years old, you will do anything to get them out of your house. If you don't feel that way, it's quite possible that you're more enmeshed than you need to be. Because the goal is to get the child to be an adult, not to keep them your child forever.
That's right, they'll never leave.
Okay. It's 11:30. Any more questions? Oh, I was going to tell you about raising Rottweilers. I've said several times, if we can raise a dog to be a policeman, we ought to be able to raise a child to be a decent member of society. Now, I'm saying this in part because I know it's public now, okay? What I'm fixing to say is, well, I won't lose my license over it, but I will have several fellow therapists disagree with me. Okay. There are some children that do not respond as well as we've been talking in here. There are some children who really are oppositional defiant. I'll wager not as many as are diagnosed, okay? But there are some children who see the world differently than you do. I use an example all the time. If there is a game board between you and I, it's got 64 squares on it, alternating black and white. And I put on your side of the board some black circles On the black squares, what are we playing? Checkers. Yes, ma'am. Is that the game they call, never mind. There's another name for it, and I can't remember what it is. Anyway, checkers. On my side of the board, I've got a row of pawns, rooks, knight, bishop, king, queen. I'm playing chess. It looks like the same board. They may even occur in the same household. And the parent thinks I'm playing checkers. Charlie said this intervention ought to work. That we ought to be able to just sit down and talk this out and figure this out. If I do this telling, teaching, coaching, delegating thing, by the time you're 18, 20 years old, you'll be an adult, be able to take care of yourself. It doesn't always work that way. Sometimes, some children play chess. And that's very, very difficult. And those I'll wager, no, not wager, it's not the right word. I'll tell you now in advance, that's going to take a lot of work. Okay? It's difficult for everybody involved. And it's not just the strong-willed child. There are some that are just wired different. I'm not talking autism, and I'm trying specifically to stay away from labels, because labels aren't good for anybody except therapists talking to other therapists. But by and large, those are the exception. They are the 1 to 3%. Those are not the ones necessarily we're addressing today. Though the funny thing to me is the reactive attachment disorder I mentioned a moment ago, the oppositional defiant I mentioned a moment ago, those children still respond to the stuff that we're talking about. Hence the story about raising Rottweilers. Okay? I did raise Rottweilers for a while. We didn't have room for large animals. Well, I guess that is one. But I mean like cows and horses. And we wanted our children to learn about life and birth and death, and that's as good a way as any is animals. And so our mama dog was 120 pounds. She was bigger than my wife. Okay? She was a big dog. We didn't get her until she was about 6 months old, so she already had some size on her. Her feet were almost as big as mine. To train a Rottweiler, or any police dog, you have to, there's some books that say to train a dog, you have to grab him by the collar, grab your pants leg, and say, okay, Juno, heel. And then start walking, heel, 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 until finally she gets so close she's supposed to walk next to your leg. How do you train a Chihuahua?
Put them in your box.
I can't bend down that far anymore. I'm 62 years old. It doesn't work, okay? So for big dogs, you get what's called a choke collar. I'm not recommending choke collars for children, so don't leave here and say Charlie said choke collars for children. I am a fan of zap collars for children, but only because you can program so that parents cannot zap them more than twice in a day. But we're never going to go there either. So that's said mostly in jest. That's said mostly in jest. Okay. But to train a large dog, you get a choke collar. It's got a slip noose on it, and the dog can choose to breathe or not. It's her choice. Okay? It does not have spikes. It does not hurt the dog. It just tightens up. So you put a leash, 6-foot leash on the chain. You stand still, get the dog positioned to your right, because I want her to walk to my right. What I'm shooting for here is I want her to learn to walk just behind me to the right and pay attention to me. That's her job. When I stop walking, she is to sit down. When I start walking, she is to follow me. That's what I'm going for, okay? So I say, Juno, she has a limited vocabulary. Dogs can learn up to 35, 40 words, but she understands Juno pretty good. Juno, she looks up at me. I said, heel. Now, that dog doesn't have a clue what heel means. She's 6 months old. She's been in a kennel all her life. She doesn't know. She wants to go play. And I say, heel, and I start walking. I don't ask for permission. I don't ask for her input. I don't ask suggestions. I have the leash is around my thumb, and my thumb is around my belt buckle. I could reach it better then, okay? And I start walking. Well, the leash tightens up, and Juno's looking around, looking at the birds and the bees and all this stuff and having a good time, and the choke collar tightens up, and she gets up and walks with me. She stays in pace. We do that for 15 minutes, back and forth in my yard. Straight lines, no turns. She gets pretty good at it. When I stop, I push down on her hindquarters, she sits. This is good. And so we do that for a week, straight lines. It's boring for both of us, okay? Then, same procedure, Juno heel, I start walking, and then I turn left. I don't ask her permission. I don't warn her. I don't say, okay, we're going to go to the store. I want you to behave. I turn left. Her job is to follow me. And it doesn't take her very long. She was a really smart dog. She figured out, ooh, I need to keep a little slack in the leash because I breathe better this way, okay? Then I started turning right. She thought, ooh, maybe. Now, I don't know how dogs think, but I know how their behavior is, and it didn't take very many right turns where I'd run into her head. I didn't knee her. I didn't punish her. I just turned right. She figured out, ooh, I need to stay back a little bit so I can see what the boss man's doing. And the only things I've said to her so far are Juno heel. She got really good. We could walk all over my acre yard, and she would, when I stopped, she stopped. Cool. When I started, she started. This is good. Keep slacking the leash. Stay just a little bit behind me. She figured it out. Then I got Diana with a live chicken, and Diana got behind the corner of the house. And I did another thing, too. I put a 30-foot leash on the dog, okay? But she only had 6 foot of it. The rest of it was wrapped around my hand and holding my belt buckle. Now then, what I'm fixing to say, I realize, and I'm saying this on purpose because I realize you're putting on YouTube and there will be feedback, okay? But I believe a dog should have the privilege of suffering a natural consequence of poor decisions, just as I believe children should have the privilege of suffering natural consequences for poor decisions. I don't want it to be life-threatening. I don't want it to be illegal or immoral. But if my son goes and gets arrested when he's 17 years old, I want him to call me and tell me where he is so I can bring him a business card next morning and say, here's a lawyer, get yourself out of jail. Because that's a natural consequence of a stupid decision. I think because Joshua knew that, I didn't have to do that. So anyway, back to Juno. Here we are. We're walking down the yard, past the corner of the house. Diana throws out a chicken. And chicken, boy, it took off. So did Juno. And I gave her all 30 feet. And I turned to walk this way. And she hit the end of the leash. 120 pounds of dog is a lot of inertia. And it nearly took me down. She was a big dog. But I kept walking. And she hit the end of the leash and did one of those Wile E. Coyote things and thudded into the ground. Oh my gosh. And she dragged for a little bit because I didn't stop. Her job is to keep up with me. Dragged her a little bit. She caught her feet, ran up beside me, and I'm not making this part up. I do speak dog this much. Man. So I doubled up my leash and kept walking. We stopped a couple times. She sat. I walked. She walked. We passed another corner of the house. Diana took another live chicken, and as we passed the corner, and Juno went, I don't think so. If you can teach a dog to be a policeman, we ought to be able to teach children to be adults. The fun thing about the dog is a very few weeks after that, I took her to the carnival. You've been to carnivals. Midway, sounds, smells, people, crowds. When you walk a 120-pound Rottweiler with a head about this wide through the crowd, they part like the Red Sea. And she behaved. When I stopped, people would say, can I pet your dog? Sure you can. And they would pet her. And then we would walk, and she behaved. And it's not because I'm cruel to my dog, but I believe great big 120-pound Rottweiler, they can be dangerous. 120-pound kid, they can be dangerous. They can do things that will affect generations. They can go get pregnant. They can have children that are not wanted. They can get drunk, run over somebody, and kill them. They can do all kinds of things that are dangerous. And I don't want to raise one of those. And I think hitting the end of the leash at high speed, it's a lesson. See, there's a way to phrase it. I would like to teach the lessons while the cost is still low, while they're still at home and you can make corrections. Once they hit 18, 19, and 20, the lessons tend to be much more expensive. As I mentioned before, death or addiction or extra children. The cost is still low. Don't touch the stove. It'll burn you. The cost is still low. Take out the trash. The cost is still low. That's why we raise children, telling, teaching, coaching, and delegating. So by the time they're 18 to 20 years old, they can be out of the home and be productive members of society. Thank you very much. I appreciate your attention. We're going to take a break now for lunch. I have some 3x5 cards here. I'm going to put them on the back seat there by the... How are folks going to get downstairs? Out that way. Okay, so I'll go back real quick and put these on the back seat. And you can pick one up, write anonymous questions. Don't bother signing them. Sunday afternoon, we'll answer these when we meet together. Let's finish with a prayer, please. Father in heaven, even as I say that I'm recognizing that you are the perfect Father, You love us as only a perfect father can. And I thank you for your grace, and I thank you for your love, and I thank you for your attention. I'm asking, Father, as we are learning things about parenting and we are learning things about relationships, and some of us are past being parents, some of us are grandparents, some of us are friends of people who have children, whatever the circumstances, I'm asking, please, that you help us to be wise, that you help us to raise adults who happen to be children in a way that would glorify you, not us, not even them, but the way that would glorify you. Please forgive us when we don't. In Jesus' name, amen. I'll take these back there.